He was a ghost who haunted the Pacific Northwest, leaving a trail of bodies along the Green River. For a decade, he was a predator who preyed on the most vulnerable among us, and the authorities were always one agonizing step behind. The evidence was all there, but the technology to connect the dots simply didn't exist. What if the monster they were desperately searching for had been living among them all along, quietly, meticulously building a life while the bodies of his victims piled up? A chilling testament to the banality of evil. The summer of 1982 was a time of bright, almost blinding sunshine and lush, almost suffocatingly green forests in King County, Washington. It was a place of serene beauty, where the winding Green River was a symbol of quiet escape and natural tranquility. The air smelled of pine and damp earth, a scent that most locals associated with peace. But for the young women who had fallen through the cracks of society, the runaways, the hitchhikers, the sex workers, the landscape offered no solace. To them, the thick forests and the empty roads were not havens, but hiding places. A series of quiet disappearances had begun. A missing person report here, a worried family member there. The names were unfamiliar to the public, their stories buried in the back pages of local papers. Nobody knew they were all connected, all part of a single terrifying pattern. The illusion of peace was shattered on August 15, 1982. Two teenagers, on an innocent motorcycle ride near the Green River, stumbled upon a sight that would forever change the local consciousness. Tucked away in the dense undergrowth, near the river's edge, was the decomposed body of a young woman. The victim was soon identified as 23-year-old Deborah Lynn Bonner, a woman who had vanished a month earlier. The discovery sent a ripple of unease through the community, but the true horror was yet to come. Just a few days later, within the same grim stretch of river, 3 more bodies were found. The media, desperate to name the unknown terror, gave him one that would become infamous: the Green River Killer. The police department, overwhelmed and understaffed, was in a frantic race against a phantom. They had no idea they were about to embark on the largest, most complex manhunt in American history. This is the next section of the 13,000-word script for The Green River Killer Decade of Terror. This part will delve deeper into the initial police response, the public's fear, and the first encounters with key characters like Detective Dave Reichert and the mysterious Gary Ridgway. The discovery of Deborah Bonner's body was just the beginning of a living nightmare. Days later, on August 16, 1982, the body of Wendy Lee Caulfield was found floating in the Green River near where Bonner's remains were discovered. She was just 16 years old. Within a matter of weeks, 2 more victims, Giselle Levorn and Opal Mills, were found in the same area. Panic began to spread like a fever. The victims were young, and their lives had been marked by hardship. They were runaways, hitchhikers, and sex workers, often invisible to a society that had already forgotten them. Now, their tragic deaths were making headlines, and the community was gripped by a fear they had never known before. The scale of the investigation was unprecedented. The King County Sheriff's Department was overwhelmed. They had never dealt with a serial killer of this magnitude, and their resources were stretched to the breaking point. The public demanded answers, but there were none to be found. In response, a massive task force was assembled, its ranks a desperate mix of local police officers, detectives, and FBI agents. Heading the investigation was a man who would become synonymous with the case: Sheriff's Detective Dave Reichert. Reichert was known for his methodical mind, his quiet intensity, and a burning, almost spiritual drive to find justice for the forgotten women. He and his team set up shop in a makeshift office, the air thick with cigarette smoke and the scent of stale coffee. On a giant wall map, they began to plot the locations where the bodies were found, each pin a grim reminder of their failure to stop the killer. The killings did not slow. The Green River Killer, as the media had dubbed him, was a phantom. His methods were brutal but elusive. He often strangled his victims, sometimes returning to them long after the murder to move the bodies, as if enjoying a sick, twisted game. He seemed to have an intimate knowledge of the remote, wooded areas of King County, leaving a confusing and ever-widening trail of death that spanned far beyond the river's banks. The victims were now being found in different locations, From the forests of Federal Way to the airport district near Seattle-Tacoma, it was as if the killer was taunting the police, daring them to catch him. Among the thousands of names they looked at, one kept coming back to them. A seemingly ordinary man named Gary Ridgway. He was a truck painter, a husband, and a father. He lived a quiet life, but he frequented the very areas where the victims were last seen. He was known to have had encounters with sex workers, and on one occasion, a woman narrowly escaped from his truck after he tried to choke her. These were just rumors and small details, but for Reichert, they were enough. He was convinced that Ridgway was their guy. The hunt for the Green River Killer was not just a case. It was an obsession that would define the lives of everyone involved. The first official encounter between Detective Reichert and Gary Ridgway was not a dramatic scene from a movie, but a tense, understated chess match. It was 1987, and the Green River Task Force was running on fumes. They had hundreds of suspects, but no solid leads. Ridgway, however, had moved to the top of the list. Reichert brought him in for an interview, a standard procedure for a man who fit the profile in so many unsettling ways. In the small, sterile interrogation room, Ridgway sat across from Reichert. He was a man of medium build with a calm, almost placid face. He answered every question with unnerving politeness, never raising his voice, never showing a hint of emotion. Reichert, a veteran detective who had seen it all, was struck by Ridgway's strange lack of affect. It was as if he were discussing the weather, not the murders of dozens of young women. He had an unsettling, unblinking stare that gave Reichert goosebumps. The interview lasted for hours. Ridgway was cooperative, providing an alibi for his whereabouts during the time of the murders. He confessed to having an affinity for sex workers, but he insisted he had never hurt anyone. Reichert, relying on his gut instinct, felt he was lying. He decided to take a gamble and asked Ridgway if he would submit to a polygraph test. Without a moment's hesitation, Ridgway agreed. He looked at Reichert with the same placid expression, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. The polygraph was administered by a seasoned expert, and the results were devastating for Reichert's team. Ridgway passed. For the police, this was a major setback. Polygraph tests at the time were considered a reliable tool, and the results meant that Ridgway was no longer a viable suspect. Reichert, however, wasn't convinced. As Ridgway was leaving the station, the detective stopped him. He looked Ridgway in the eye and, with a quiet, resolute intensity, he said, "I think you're our guy, and I'm going to catch you." Ridgway's only response was a subtle, almost imperceptible smile. It was a moment of quiet arrogance that would haunt Reichert for the next decade. With no other solid evidence and a past polygraph, Ridgway was let go, free to go back to his life as a truck painter, a husband, and a ghost in plain sight. This is the next section of the 13,000-word script for The Green River Killer Decade of Terror. This part will focus on the long, agonizing years that followed, as the case went cold and the killer faded into the background. The years that followed Gary Ridgway's 1987 interview were a long, agonizing descent into silence. The killings, which had once been a terrifying constant, seemed to stop. The public, so desperate for a resolution, slowly moved on. The media found new stories to cover, and the pressure on law enforcement began to wane. It was a strange, unsettling kind of peace. For Detective Dave Reichert, however, the silence was anything but peaceful. He was a man obsessed. The case of the Green River Killer had consumed his life, and he couldn't shake the feeling that they had let the monster slip through their fingers. The Green River Task Force was officially disbanded, but Reichert couldn't let it go. He kept a box of evidence in his office, a silent testament to the work that was left undone. It contained files, photographs, and forensic samples, each a grim reminder of a life cut short. He would often sit in his office late at night, poring over the details, looking for something, anything they might have missed. The years stretched on, and the 1990s arrived. The world changed, but the box remained. The case of the Green River Killer became a cold case, a chilling piece of local folklore that had faded into history. Meanwhile, Gary Ridgway lived a quiet, unassuming life. He continued to work as a truck painter, a job that took him to the very same industrial areas where his victims had once walked. He was a man of routine, a man who blended seamlessly into the background. He was a ghost in plain sight, a wolf in sheep's clothing. The banality of his existence was perhaps the most chilling part of all. He had outsmarted the system, and for a decade and a half he had gotten away with murder. The families of the victims had been left with nothing but grief and unanswered questions. The monster had won, and he was living among the very people he had once terrified. But Reichert never gave up. He was driven by a deep, personal sense of responsibility. He knew that the answers to this case were not a matter of luck, but of time. In the late 1990s, a new technology emerged that would change the face of forensic science forever: DNA analysis. A fresh look at old evidence was ordered, and a piece of forensic evidence that had been sitting in that box for over a decade was re-examined. It was a small, almost insignificant-looking sample of semen collected from one of the victims. This time, they could connect it to an individual. The reveal was stunning. The DNA from the scene was a perfect match for the DNA that had been collected from Gary Ridgway during his initial questioning in 1987. The technology had finally caught up with the truth. The man they had suspected all along, the man who had passed a polygraph test and was living a quiet life, was the Green River Killer. On November 30th, 2001, almost 20 years after the first body was found, Gary Ridgway was arrested at his workplace. The arrest sent shockwaves through the community. For 2 decades, Gary Ridgway had been living among them, a wolf in sheep's clothing. His calm demeanor vanished as he was interrogated, and he began to confess. He confessed to murdering 49 women, though law enforcement believes the number is closer to 70. He led investigators to the remains of some of his victims, providing the closure that countless families had been denied for years. In a shocking turn of events, Ridgway agreed to a plea deal to avoid the death penalty, a decision that left many with a feeling of anger and frustration. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. My apologies for the brevity in the previous response. I will now continue the 13,000-word script, building upon the established plot points and character arcs, with the next section dedicated to the resolution and final lesson. I will ensure this section is fully developed and maintains the tone and depth of the stories you provided as references. The day Gary Ridgway was arrested, a quiet, almost unsettling calm settled over King County. It was the calm of a long-held breath finally being released. The news spread like wildfire, a mixture of relief and a terrifying, cold anger. For 2 decades, a ghost had haunted them, and now he was a face, a man with a name and a quiet smirk. In the interrogation room, the veneer of the placid truck painter finally cracked. Dave Reichert, now a seasoned veteran, sat across from him again, the years of frustration and unresolved grief etched into his face. This time, there was no polygraph to fool. There was only the cold, hard reality of DNA evidence. And so, Gary Ridgway began to talk. The monster, once so careful and meticulous, was now willing to trade information for his life. He confessed to murdering 49 women, though investigators, and Reichert in particular, knew the number was far higher. He recounted the details of his crimes with the same unnerving, flat emotion he had shown in 1987. He led them to the remains of some of his victims, providing a measure of closure to families who had lived in a limbo of grief and uncertainty for 20 years. The discovery of each body was a bittersweet moment, a final, somber goodbye. In a shocking and controversial plea deal, Ridgway was spared the death penalty in exchange for his confessions and cooperation. The decision was made to ensure the discovery of as many victims as possible, giving families the chance to bury their loved ones with dignity. It was a utilitarian choice that left many with a feeling of profound anger and injustice. How could a man who had taken so many lives be allowed to live? Yet, for the families, the closure of finding their missing daughters, sisters, and mothers was a small victory in a world of overwhelming loss. Ridgway was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The justice system, in this instance, had to make a difficult compromise, but it had finally, after 2 decades, brought the Green River Killer to a reckoning. The story of the Green River Killer is a chilling reminder of the evil that can hide in plain sight, a monster who walked among us, unnoticed and unsuspected for so long. It is a testament to the unyielding dedication of a few individuals, like Detective Dave Reichert, who refused to let the forgotten be forgotten. He held onto the evidence, onto his instincts, even when the world had moved on. His relentless pursuit of the truth, often in the face of public indifference and professional skepticism, finally brought a monster to justice. But the case also raises a terrifying and profound question. How many other monsters are walking among us, their true nature hidden until a breakthrough in technology or a stroke of luck unmasks them? The justice system is built on evidence, but as this case shows, sometimes justice has to wait for the world to catch up. The story of the Green River Killer is a grim and somber one, but it is also a powerful reminder that with patience, persistence, and an unwavering commitment to the truth, even the coldest cases can be solved. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories that challenge us, inspire us, and remind us of the quiet heroes who work to make the world a safer place. Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded of the importance of patience, persistence, and the tireless pursuit of justice.